Welcome to Dad Rocks, a podcast for dads who love music, made by dads who love music.
Hello and welcome to Dad Rocks, a podcast about being a dad and loving music and how the two intersect in our lives. I'm your host Josh, and today my guest is Luther Dickinson. Luther is the co-founder, lead singer, and lead guitar player of the band North Mississippi All-Stars, a band he founded with his brother Cody, who was a guest on our show in late 2023. Luther was also the lead guitar player for the Black Crowes from 2007 to 2011, and he is part of the jam band supergroup The Word, which includes his brother Cody, formerly bass player Chris Chu, who was in the North Mississippi All-Stars, John Medeski from Medeski Martin Wood, and the one and only Robert Randolph. Luther is also a solo artist, and he is the father of two daughters. He's also the son of well-known and well-celebrated record producer Jim Dickinson. Now, as I said, his brother Cody was on the show in late 2023, and that in itself was a great honor for me to have Cody on the show. And I had asked Cody, would your brother be interested? I had tried to contact Luther through, the normal means, like through his representation and whatnot, and I hadn't heard from him. And Cody's like, yeah, man, yeah, he would definitely be into it. Just email him. And I'm like, all right, what's his email address? And he gave me his email address, and Luther was all about it. And we had been in contact for several months. It was hard to get a date going, but then I went and saw him and JD Simo play at Debonair Hall in Teaneck, New Jersey, this small club. And I went up to him after the show and said, hey, man, this is, my name's Josh. We've been in contact. He's like, yeah. We got to do the show. And so we finally found a time to do the show in December while he was on tour with the Allman Betts Family Revival. And, it was just an absolute pleasure to have him on the show. I mean, he is one of the best guitar players out there. I think in the late 2000s, Rolling Stone had him, not as the top 3 living guitar gods, but he was on the list of, one of the best living guitar players currently at that time, and I still think he is. So this was a true honor for me. I've been a big fan of his work, especially North Mississippi All-Stars, The Word, and of course the Black Crowes, since, I first heard them in late 2001 when I was in college. And we talk a little bit about that later in the show. And, it was great because he gave me about an hour of his time, and it was great, to have that opportunity. And he was just so generous with that time. And I think we got some great stories out of it. And I really had a fantastic time talking to him. It's pretty amazing. The conversations I had with him and his brother were completely different. And I love that. We didn't talk about the same stories at all. And it was just a really fun and wonderful conversation I had with a musician I completely and totally respect. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Luther Dickinson. Luther, welcome to Dad Rocks.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. I mean, we had your brother on last year, and it's an honor to have you on the show as well. Now, you and your brother are actually currently on tour with the Allman Betts Family Revival. How is the tour going?
Man, this is such a great tradition. It just keeps getting better every year. And man, God, Dwayne Betts is a hero, and like, our father, Cody and I, our dad was friends with their fathers, and especially Dwayne, actually. He was closest with Dwayne, but he worked with Greg later on. But, we grew up with the Allman Brothers our whole life. At first, they were just like folk heroes. Like my mom would tell me crazy stories about Dwayne Allman, and we'd get into that later, And then literally, I know, I remember being like extremely high at 17, 18, 19, and like listening to Live at the Fillmore and like
Oh yeah.
thinking this is because the double CD remastered box
Yeah,
set of the whole show was released,
I had
and
that. Yeah, we had that one at
yeah,
the house. Yeah.
it changed my life. It was one of those records, like the first Sacred Steel record that changed my life.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that, tripping acid. And I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. And I should have dreamed bigger. That's all I got to say.
Hey
But
man.
but no, no, no. All jokes aside, it's as a second generation rock and roller to stand toe to toe with these dudes is an honor. It means a lot to me that they include us and invite us, and I'm just so proud of them. Devin has been referring to it as the songbook, and I'm totally in harmony with that concept. Now that Greg and Dickie are both gone,
Hmm.
it's American folk music,
Yeah,
and it has to be protected.
absolutely.
And they are the right dudes to do it, and just to do it, like of course they play the music all the time, but to go full in high concept, nothing but brothers every December, it's really cool. I'm really
Yeah.
proud of those dudes.
Absolutely. And I unfortunately I was looking, there were two shows in my area and I just couldn't pull it off because family stuff. And I heard like I had a friend who went last year and he said it was amazing and I got to put it on my list for next year. And but I did get to see you and JD Simo at Debonair Hall in Teaneck, New Jersey last month. Now that show was a lot of fun. It was a very, I mean, you guys seem to be having a lot of fun on stage. How was that tour overall?
That is so much fun, man. It's a small group of like-minded people, man. Like Adam and JD and myself, it's a wild bunch. It's inmates running the asylum all the way, man. It's really, really fun. Aesthetically, conceptually, we're just on the same page, and it just gets wilder and wilder. And and all three of us are anarchists, musical anarchists in a certain way. And yeah, it's you know we would just get together and jam for fun. And before
Mm.
we knew it, we had like 7 tracks. And we were like, okay, well, let's just get together one more time and finish this. And JD convinced me to sing a couple of songs, which I wasn't really interested in doing. But, it took me a minute to get comfortable. I really don't like singing in other situations.
Mm.
In any other situation, I just want to play.
Yeah.
But no, it's so much fun. I love those guys.
I
I
loved
love
watching.
playing. I love playing bass, man.
Yeah,
I
that's what I
get
was gonna say. I loved watching you play bass. I was like, oh wow, like you guys really are changing everything up. I mean, the only thing you didn't do is you sit on the drums, which I know you do with the All Stars, and I saw you do with the Word way back when as well. Um, but like, yeah, it was. I didn't know what to expect. Like, I just went. It was close by to where I live, and I just went and I'd listened to the album, and I was like, I gotta go check this out. It's like around the
thank
corner from
you.
where I live, and it was great. And it was really fun to see you play like some dirty blues. I mean, with North Mississippi All Stars, you guys do the blues stuff, but it's more jammy, and this one was definitely more like down, like and dirty, a little bit psychedelic, but like definitely down and dirty, and it was great.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up because to expand on that, the different concepts. Like from I grew up, like listening to country blues. Fred McDowell,
Mhm.
Furry Lewis, Mississippi John Hurt. I love that. And I also grew up with psychedelic rock and folk rock and psychedelic folk rock.
Yeah.
And 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 that's my slant on it. Like Hill Country Blues, I love the riffs, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, but I truly, the bluesier the song is at this point in time, the more psychedelic I try to play. Like I'm pretty much these days trying to avoid playing quote unquote bluesy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But JD, man, because my thing's like no matter what, I can truly own being a psychedelic uh folk rock guitar player.
Hmm.
Roots. I mean, if I'm gonna call any music anything, I don't really like genres, but I like roots as
Yeah.
an overall umbrella. Because it's the roots, American folk music, American music, the roots, and then the branches of the tree. This might be country, this might be gospel, this might be blues, this might whatever you want to call it. It's all roots music. And
Absolutely.
but with JD, man, I grew up in North Mississippi outside of Memphis. But JD grew up on the south side of Chicago.
Mm.
And he is a legit blues man. I mean, Buddy Guy called him on his 16th birthday and wished him a happy birthday. Because he was
Wow.
already like on the circuit cutting heads as a slinger. But
Crazy.
man, when he sings, it's so it's like Lamar Williams Jr. to me and Sierra Green, a New Orleans singer we've been working with.
Mm.
It's so sad and legit. I really feel it when
Yeah.
he sings. And dude, he is a alpha stallion of the guitar. You know what I mean? Like it's really fun uh because it's like we really are kind of like a small flock of birds flying around,
Yeah.
we're all just like a handful of horses just running haywire through the field when we improvise.
Yeah. Now, this being, Dad Rocks, and I'm curious because you've essentially been on the road for the last 20 plus years, 25 years. You got two kids at home. While, this is your career, it is your lifestyle. Obviously, when you married your wife, she knew what she was getting into. But how has, being a father affected you while you're on tour?
Yeah, it's taught me to really double and triple task and try to use every moment to its fullest. Like when I'm on the road, not only am I driving and tour managing, and I try to avoid doing the merch, but I'm doing the set list.
Hmm.
I work hard on the road and I don't mind doing so. But every morning, whenever the opportunity arises, I work on other aspects of music, usually creative work first thing in the morning. That's my best. As long as I can hold the concentration of like just roll straight out of bed and get to work and go, be it pen and paper or guitar in hand or on the computer. Um, I try every day to get it in. And when I'm on the road, even more so because um, when I'm on the road, I'm actually working. So why not use every free moment to work on music?
Hmm.
I mean, of course, you relax and zone out, but it's really taught me to try to utilize the time away from home as much as possible. So when we're home, I don't have to try and catch up and do that.
Mm.
And it's also I record on the road, like if I have a day off, um, oftentimes I'll find a studio and go work there, just to get it for many reasons. One, I love collecting studios and making friends with
Hmm.
musicians and engineers, but it's a good way to work on the road. We made a lot of records on the road doing that, recording while we're on the road. But man, it's tricky, man. And the older my kids get, and it's like I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old,
Hmm.
and watching them change and uh it really makes me cherish this time before they really become independent and lose that childish joy for when I'm home.
Yeah.
And it's only natural, but I tell them all the time, it's like the decisions I made that led to me traveling for work were made way before you were a consideration. I wouldn't have chosen this
Right.
necessarily. But the flip side of it is when I'm home, man, I'm all in. It,
Mm.
I do work at home, but not only when uh, they're not interested in being with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, you know, obviously, when I talked to your brother, as I mentioned before we started recording, he was in the midst of a tour, and his kids are much younger than yours, but he was definitely pining about like missing them, especially at such an early age. Did you feel the same way when your daughters were the same ages as your niece and nephew?
Yeah, there's a bigger age difference. Um, between my kids, we have a 5 year age difference, and my older daughter was a really great traveler.
Hmm.
So my wife and older daughter would meet me places, and so we had a lot of great times on the road together. But by the time my second daughter was older, then we had to pay for,
Yeah.
the kid gets to the age where you have to pay for them. It's an added expense. And also, two is a handful, and the
Hmm.
second kid wasn't as easy at traveling
Yeah.
all the time, so they ended up staying home more. Um, but the early times were, man, we had a lot of great, 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 great trips.
Yeah.
So, and then, but I gotta say that, like, this time, like, watching my teenager, you know, find her way, and then having the 10-year-old just like with one foot over, 1 foot in, like, being like still in imagination play,
Yeah.
and 1 foot into wanting to be older, but still like she's a really she's like her mom. She's always she's finds herself always by my side when I'm home. Um, it's funny. My older daughter is very creative, and very much like myself and my dad, and my younger daughter is very much like my mom.
Hmm.
So I'm a lone wolf. I'm either living communally with work or family, but if I have any time alone, I cherish that time alone. And my older daughter's like that. And
Hmm.
she's gets in her own world and does her thing. And I totally know where she's at. But my younger daughter, she's more like my wife. And uh, she likes, it's funny, the similar chemistry. My wife and I were best friends for years. And then, and now her daughter,
Yeah.
it's an easy hang.
Yeah. And, now like with your daughter, getting to that age of being a teenager in high school and even your younger daughter getting to that age of, preteen, or not there yet, but getting close. What kind of music is happening in your house? I assume they're both, at least into music based on your lineage and, after talking especially with your brother and finding out that your grandmother was a musician and,
Yeah.
you know, and so what's going on at home in terms of music? Are they playing music? What are they listening to?
My first thing that pops into mind is that, I don't subscribe to Spotify.
Hmm.
I use YouTube Music and I love it. But man, what Spotify has done for the kids is amazing. Like, they turn me on to so much music, and their voracious appetites are so exploratory. Like, they'll play me some song, some modern song, and then they'll play me like some Cuban folk music where the
Mm,
the sample came from. So all
wow.
of a sudden, my kids have me listening to Cuban folk music, or my daughter was like, "Man, I love John Coltrane's Alabama," which is one of my
Wow.
favorite songs, and maybe it popped up out algorithmically because it's in my cat, it's one of my
Yeah.
favorites. But it's fantastic, letting them DJ. For
Yeah.
me, it's really fun. But it, something that I have to clarify to my wife all the time is that the North Mississippi All Stars is not children's music. Like, it is decidedly inappropriate and always has been.
Well, those songs you guys are singing is, are not, while the lyrics themselves are clean. I actually just
Well, the
like,
traditional lyrics
yeah,
are just veiled
right.
metaphorically, like,
Exactly. Right.
they're not, they're not clean at all.
Well,
And
I
then the
mean,
ones I've written, especially when I was younger, were nasty.
yeah, well, I mean, what I mean is, like, it won't pop up as explicit on the playlist.
Oh,
But
right.
like the meaning, and I was actually I teach, and I was explaining this to a kid today who was playing some music in class, and I was like, so is this school appropriate? Like, I know the words are probably clean, but is the content appropriate? And he gave me a look and like shut off his music. But I totally get what you're saying. That's the one thing is, like, you kind of got to be like, well, can they handle this? Is it gonna, is this stuff we want our kids to be listening to, kind of deal?
But it's like, as a writer of anything, be it music or as a creator, I tell everybody, never edit or criticize in the moment of creation, because that you will just get jammed up. Like
Hmm.
you cannot let yourself. You have to keep that inner editor and inner critic at bay, and just create, and edit later. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
cannot worry about whatever you're creating in the moment, because it'll choke you off. Um, it's that's the devil. That's how you get writer's block or whatever, is like, editing something before you even write it, or as you write it, critiquing it, or wondering what someone's going to think about it or whatever. Just go, 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 go. There's plenty of time to do that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, the All Stars, it's just not appropriate for kids. But I'd make some music that is,
Well,
I
I was
made
just
it.
going to ask you about your children's album that you put out. I think earlier this year. Of folk and blues songs. Like, where did that idea come from? You know, how many of them are your original songs? Like, and what was it like if you did write, most of them or any of them? Like, what was the process of writing those?
I wrote two songs, one of which I included on the record for my daughters, just as just a forever message
Hmm.
to keep them company. Um, but the whole point was I wanted to share songs that my dad shared with me. Like
Okay.
almost all of these, I remember being a little bitty kid and my dad playing them for me. And our whole relationship, our whole life together, my father and I would, analyze songs and the lyrics and
Mm.
the different devices, and he loved talking about lyrics. And so I wanted to share those songs with my kids. And what I thought was really cool was that he learned those songs from Furry Lewis and Gus
Mm.
Cannon, and like from bluesmen that were his friends. Because in Memphis, not my dad was not a hippie; he was a bohemian cat.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Rock and roll, like a '50s rocker, and then a bohemian folk musician. But he was never truly a hippie. But the when the young musicians and the bluesmen of Memphis got together, it was just a wonderful community and experience for all involved. And so like these songs, got, like I said, Gus Cannon, Furry Lewis, Bucka White. Um, I thought it was fantastic that my kids would be the fourth generation
Mm.
to learn these songs through the oral tradition.
Yeah.
And that's where the concept of magic music for family folk came from, because my kids were really young when I started recording it. And I
Mm.
wanted to share the experience of recording with them. And I wanted to share uh, the concept that music is communal. Like we would have
Hmm.
dinner parties, like say Allison Russell and JT Nero from the Birds of Chicago. They would come over with their kids, and we would have food, and we'd play music and record and work on the record together. And it's funny. The first time, so I wasn't even trying to make a record,
Mm.
really. I wanted to make a CD that my kids could listen to and sing along with in the car when I was gone,
Oh, wow.
because they listen to CDs and sing along,
Yeah.
especially when they were younger. And so I did that. It was just a drum machine and my guitar and voice. And then once they learned the songs, months later, I overdubbed them on singing along.
Hmm.
Uh,
I did, because I did hear a couple children's, vocals in there. I wasn't sure if it were your kids or something
yeah.
else.
And then we put the record on the shelf for like 3 or 4 years, and then they overdubbed on top of themselves with more mature voices.
Oh, wow.
So it's really cool. But man, my older daughter, she is a natural, because like I said, it was a dinner party. Yola was there.
Oh,
She laid her
wow.
vocals. She's on Beulah Land,
Okay, yeah.
and I'll tell you that story in a sec. That was like my favorite. Allison and JT were there. Allison Russell, and then the kids started overdubbing. And everyone's like crying and clapping
Yeah.
and, oh, that was so cool, and blah blah blah. And then my daughter, she's like, hey, let me talk to you. He's like, don't you get paid for recording? And I was like, yes, yes. Here's a hundred
Yeah.
bucks.
I got a brother in Beulah Lane, outshine the sun. I got a brother in Beulah Lane, outshine the sun. I got a brother in Beulah Lane,
No, but that, I mean, that I was listening to the album the other day and I was just like, this is, it's very unique because and I've asked people who have created children's albums. I remember asking, when we first started the podcast, Chris Ballou from Presidents United States of America, he has his
Yeah.
alter ego, Casper Baby Pants, put out like 30 albums of kids music. And I was just like, and Medeski, Martin and Wood, they put out their kids album. And the idea of children's music, like making children's music that is competent and like is literally is like real music, kind of as sometimes goes away. And like it's refreshing to hear albums that are geared towards kids that are not your standard children's music.
Yeah, these are all just folk songs, you know.
Yeah.
None of them are really kid songs per se.
Which is kind of what
Um,
Raffi did. Raffi, when he was
yeah,
doing it, he was doing folk stuff and he was doing, a lot of like, standard, Christian, almost Christian, gospel stuff.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, but that's what folk music's all about,
Yeah.
passing it on, and it's really cool. And also, God, I just applaud anyone adding to the collection of children's music because there's so much bad stuff out there
Yes,
that's
that's
just
what yeah.
it's so rough out there.
Yeah. It's that's why, it's great to hear, these types of songs geared towards kids. And hopefully some of them may not get it now, but like hopefully they'll pick it up and remember it later on in life, which is what, happened to me. Like I remember hearing a lot of stuff when I was younger that when I heard it again as an adult, I was like, "Oh my God, this was, I remember this. This was ingrained in my head."
I like um I like music that is like a byproduct or like an artifact of the community, like of the hang. Like where music is like people. It's like what JD Simon and Adam and I did. It's like the album is really a afterthought of us just enjoying working together, being together.
Yeah.
And there's two other records I'd love to mention real quick that came out this year that are super under the radar. Um, my friend David Katznelson and I, an old uh, partner of mine, we've been producing Mississippi records together for years, but we made a ambient drone
Interesting.
record called, the band is called Gravel Springs, and the
Okay.
record is called Crow's Nest Meditations. And it's like you can listen to this music like late at night. Side A is pretty. Side B is really creepy. It's
Hmm.
funny. It came out around Halloween, coincidentally. And it was a really
Yeah.
good Halloween record. But Crow's Nest Meditations by Gravel Springs is really cool drone ambient music. And then John Medeski, Dominic Davis, and Johnny Vodakovich and I recorded an instrumental record called Mississippi Murals
Yeah, man.
that's out.
It's great. I know when I saw you at the show, I asked you about it because I saw the vinyl and I was not sure about it. I went back and listened to it on Spotify the next day, and I couldn't stop listening to it. I had, I was going to bring this up later, but since you brought it up, it is it was really refreshing to hear you because it's almost a jazz album, or it is a jazz album, and you're in the licks you're playing. It's like I haven't heard you play those kinds of licks before, and I was like, this is great. Like, and I throw it on in the back of my classroom sometimes, just like while kids are working. But I love it. It's a
Thank
great album.
you. Thank you. The backstory is there's this Mississippi artist, Walter Anderson, long gone, but he did these murals in the community center in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, back in the 30s and 40s, I think. And the room inspired me to know, and I wrote all this music inspired by this room and this art, these murals. And we all got together and we play there once a year. And we recorded this the second year. It's an annual event. I'm so glad you like it. And Medeski, I mean,
Oh,
he's wonderful.
yeah. I mean, we'll talk about the word a little bit later, but I mean, MMW is like is like top two, top three band of all time for me, and
Totally.
had Billy Martin on the show, and I've taken lessons with whatever. He's Medeski's amazing, and we'll talk a little bit about the word in a little bit, but I wanted to kind of just ask again, like with your kids, you being a musician and your father, being heavily in the music world, I know he, definitely had a major influence on you. You said you guys would sit down and kind of analyze songs. How do you approach, music with your kids in general? Like, do you try to, show them stuff? I know you said that they show you stuff. Do you try to like, did you, I'm assuming you didn't really push them because I've talked to a lot of, musicians that they don't push their kids to try anything. They just let them, go as they may. But
Hmm.
like, what kind of like, how do you deal with music with your kids?
Well, you listen to records, vinyl, and we have vinyl downstairs. We have a record player in every room in the house,
Hmm.
and there's records everywhere, and we listen to all kinds of music, and they watch me. Uh, I learned a great trick, a great hmm, approach from my dear friend Anders Osborne,
Hmm.
as a creative, as a songwriter. Like, at first you think you need to lock yourself away, but no, that's a better way. If you can learn to write in the kitchen and just have it be part of the family. You don't have to lock yourself away and isolate
Mm.
yourself and have it be this thing, Just it's funny. I don't keep, the music stuff stays in the music room,
Yeah.
but I'll always be wearing a guitar, or at least have at least one on the couch or the table,
Yeah.
um, and just play and write. Just it's just part of day-to-day life, and then not include them, but just don't isolate myself just to get it done. Because to me, when I get home off the road and I pick up a guitar at home is really the most creative time for me for writing music for some reason. Um, but and then yeah, like I don't force them to do it. We do it together. My younger daughter and I sometimes we'll just sit at the piano and improvise,
Mm.
until she loses interest and she takes violin and
Okay.
my older daughter plays bass and likes to make beats and
Oh, nice.
yeah, and I always tell her she should be a DJ. She should do electronic music because but it's fun. And the record itself, like we've done shows where they sang with me,
Oh, cool.
and it's really fun. Just
That's
try to
awesome.
make it casual,
Yeah.
not a big deal.
And you guys are in Nashville? Are you based in Nashville these days or?
We moved there for schools.
Oh. And so
Yeah,
being in that town, it's got to be just music everywhere, and that's got to they just probably soak that stuff up nonstop.
yeah. There's a lot of musician families. It's a great infrastructure. It's the cool thing is like because I'm gone a lot, and for them, it's a shared experience.
Yeah.
They're not like the only family around
Right.
where the dad's not there.
Yeah. It's kind of like if you were an actor and you're living in LA and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to your childhood, like when did you first start playing? Obviously, music was everywhere in your house, and I remember your brother told me that when you were born, your dad stopped basically working or touring or playing music and just, went just into the studio. But when did you start, playing music and what was your first instrument?
It's for me. It's always been guitar. Tape machine was my first. The reel-to-reel tape machines.
Okay.
The I love those, and that was my favorite toy. My mom would just sit and run it. I don't remember really the early times. So obviously, I would just watch it spin
Yeah.
without even listening to it. And then always had a tape machine of my own, or I would steal my dad's. Then we had a 4-track cassette later in the 80s. But I don't remember not knowing that I was going to play guitar.
Oh, wow.
But I wasn't a natural, and Dad was not. He did not blow smoke up my ass about it. He was very honest um, about the fact that I had a long way to go, and it would be a hard. He had tried to encourage me to do other things, but I just always knew I would be a guitar player.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, and I'll tell you what, just having that focus and having like knowing I think it can be a greater advantage than heap loads of natural talent. I know a lot of very, 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 naturally inherently talented people that um, have a hard time, uh, as professionals.
Yeah. And so when I guess, what kind of music, obviously, I'd heard stories about you going, you being in the studio with your dad a lot. But what kind of music were you kind of drawn to, especially when did you start playing guitar? Was it like 10 or earlier or,
When I had one, like I got my first electric when I was about nine,
okay.
8 or 9 or whatever, but I had a toy plastic guitar,
Yeah.
and but hey, I did want to add one thing.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to play guitar, but I wasn't a natural musician, but I did have a natural creative process that I've been able to that I can apply to whatever, be
Hmm.
it like putting a band together and making a record or
Yeah.
producing a record or writing a song or doing the dishes or organizing the garage. It's a that is was a and I had a great art teacher in school
Very cool.
that helped a lot with just like, and especially once we started making records with Pro Tools, it's definitely it definitely gets into visual art type of post hip hop sample based modern music making. It's more than just playing an instrument. It can be. You
Yeah.
know. So anyway, I grew up with my dad's music. I love Bo Diddley.
Hmm.
Bo Diddley has always been one of my favorites. Chuck Berry, Jimi Hendrix, really early on was my favorite. Then the Allman Brothers were no jive, like literally one of my favorites. Classic rock radio growing up,
Yeah.
but and then the country blues and the classic blues of like the 40s and 50s, like Muddy Waters, John Lee Hooker, Howlin' Wolf. That my dad, to me, I loved it. It was my dad's music. But man, when I was 12, I got turned on to Black Flag,
Oh, wow.
the California punk band.
Yeah.
And to me, when I got the first single I had was Six Pack, and I put it on, and I was like, oh, now this is music from my planet. Like
Yeah.
this is my music. And I asked my dad to try and help me learn it on guitar and help me figure it out. And he couldn't figure it out. He got so
Wow.
mad. He was like, what is this shit? This makes no sense at all. I can't believe you found something I can't relate to. Like, and that made me love it even more. Um, and so I checked out a lot of punk bands,
Hmm.
but Black Flag was always my favorite. I just love the riffs. I love the beats and the guitar. It was so heavy, and it just always appealed to me. Um,
And I think I remember either you said there was a interview with you or somewhere that like was it the Replacements you got to sit in during the recording of when your dad was working the Replacements and that was like an eye-opening world changing experience for you as well.
for sure, I was 13 and 14 when the Replacements came to town, and I love them. And by that time, I could play well enough, and I was studying. I was just soaking up everything. I'd been practicing really hard for a few years, and and I had all the practice tapes and demos and rough
Hmm.
mixes. And I was like, Dad was working during the day, but all I would be at home, like voraciously going over these cassettes. And I really learned a lot studying it. And Paul's always, I've only, spoken to Paul maybe 3 or 4 times,
Yeah.
but he's always been really cool. But Tommy's been a friend ever since
Yeah.
because he was really young. Like I was 14, but he was only 20,
Yeah.
and I recently just saw him recently. He was fantastic. It was very, 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 very influential.
Yeah. And when did you start your first band? And was Cody part of that band, or did
Oh
you?
yeah,
Okay.
for sure. We've been playing together ever since he got his first drum kit at 11 or 12. And that was literally, but Cody, now I was not a natural, but Cody was. He could play
Yeah.
everything. He was playing the guitar super well, like age 5 or 6. Um, and by the time I was really focusing on guitar, Dad encouraged him to play drums so we could play together.
Hmm.
Because it's hard for two people to practice guitar together,
Yeah.
you know. Um, And so he borrowed a drum kit, and Cody just sat down and started playing drums, and we've been playing in bands ever since, you know.
Yeah. And he
And go ahead.
No, I was gonna. He told the story when I interviewed him. It's just amazing that your dad, when you guys moved to the house with your grandmother, that they put up like sacks of like burlap sacks as your first like practice room or something like that. And
Yeah.
I mean, was it just you two at that time, or was someone else playing with you, or is it just literally a duo?
No, we had high school friends, and one of our high school friends, Kevin Houston, he went on to become our recording engineer partner.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, because he was a little bit older, and he went to University of Memphis, and they had a great recording program still, and he became a recording engineer, and he's recorded, you know, he's been our partner ever since. And once we eventually hit the road, he stayed home and made a lot of records with dad. He spent a lot of time with our father once we left town.
Yeah. And did you guys were you? I mean, obviously like I'll ask a couple of questions about anime, but like when you guys were recording, was your first recording sessions at the Zebra Ranch, or was it, did you guys go off somewhere else because you wanted to kind of like separate from your father?
We built a Zebra Ranch later.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
so
we were teenagers, late teens, early 20s when we were building Zebra Ranch, which it was, and I say building, it was an old hay barn converted into a
Mm.
ramshackle house. And we converted it into a ramshackle studio, you know.
And was that
But
yours or was that your dad's? Was it his or was it
it,
everybody's?
it was his concept. It
Okay.
was his vision. He always wanted a alternative recording space, you
Yeah.
know. But no, we would go to Memphis and record. We worked at Sam Phillips Recording
Okay.
and Ardent
Yep.
Record, you know, all
Big
his
Star. Yep.
places.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. But hey, you know, I have to say that as far as musical families, you know, fast forward just a little bit, um, and once we fell in with Other Turner and his family
Hmm.
of fife and drum musicians,
Oh
and
yeah.
R.L. Burnside and his family of second generation musicians, and Junior Kimbrough and his family of musicians, it was so wild because like they had a juke joint and we had a recording studio, and the younger cats, I mean, I loved the elders' music so much, and then their kids were just like us.
Yeah.
And oh man, the 90s were so much fun.
And is that how like anime like kind of got started in terms of the style of music? Because I mean, it's unique to hear like that played just in general, but like especially from a couple, white kids coming up and like especially the music that you were listening to before, but was that experience of just being with those families kind of like, all right, this is the kind of music we want to start playing.
Yeah, totally. It got to where I couldn't write. I wasn't writing any rock and roll. Everything I wrote was really rootsy, and I just lost my taste for a rock and roll band.
Hmm.
So, and it was one night, long story short, I just had the idea, and I was like, I can't take it anymore. We're just gonna start an alter identity called North Mississippi All Stars. It'll be a
Mhm.
loose collective of us from the community, and we'll just play the shared repertoire. Because like in the hills, it's like everyone plays different versions of the same songs, you
Hmm.
know. Because literally, like it was a small, uh, you know, it was like the music's like a community service. It's like you either play parties or little homemade nightclubs, or um, and it's just a local thing, and people want to hear these songs in the community.
Yeah.
And you know, and then Cedric and Gary Burnside, we started playing shows together. We went on the road opening up for Galactic with the double drums
Yeah.
and Gary and I, and
Oh, nice.
it was fantastic.
I mean, that live album you guys did it's called Hill Country View. Is that the Hill Country View? Whatever, the live album where you have like all the Burnsides on there
Yeah,
it's super fun. I love it.
that was the pinnacle of the concept. It'll never be that good again because our father was there, R.L. Burnside was there, his sons were there, Otha Turner's grandsons were there, JoJo Herman, Chris Robinson. You
Yeah.
know, that was, you know, multi-generational hill country, psychedelic hill country blues. When we first started the band, I wanted to just be as traditional as possible
Hmm.
and just play hill country. But we got a weekly gig on Beale Street, and we were playing like 3 hours a
Oh,
night.
wow.
And so we started improvising, and it dawned on me, I was like, oh, wait a minute, we can improvise around this material just like we grew up improvising around uh, everything else.
And
So
is
that's
that how,
when
oh,
our
go ahead.
kind of okay, so we started jamming, quote unquote, on the Hill Country Blues. And so R.L. Burnside, 2 years in a row, he called me up and he would invite us to come play his wife's birthday party.
Okay.
And Big Mama Burnside's birthday party was the coolest gig around, you know. So so we're in the carport, they call it. It's like an outdoor garage with an overhang, and there's like extension cords coming out the windows into the amps, and the drums are set up, and then Burnside and his family and friends are sitting in folding lawn chairs. And he was sitting there and he would request that we play his songs and then just sit there and laugh at us while we had tried to do it, you know. He thought it was so funny. And I didn't want to go psychedelic on in that
Yeah.
situation. And Cody was like, go man, go, don't be scared, go. So we finally went, we started jamming, and then Burnside just started laughing harder and harder.
Well, well, well. Mr. R.L. Burnside, I'd like to thank you very personally for everything you've done for us.
I got to ask about this jamming because you guys were part of the early 2000s, the 2000s jam scene. And that's how you met Medeski initially. But like, how did you like legitimately were you approached by promoters or did you like how did you end up like on festivals and touring with like Galactic and stuff like that to get you into the jam scene?
It's funny. The early jam scene before like the influence of electronic music, um, it didn't matter what genre you played. It was like
Yeah.
if you could just get that feeling, you know, it could be New York jazz, or it could be New Orleans funk, or it could
Yeah.
be bluegrass, or it could be country blues, or it could be classic rock. You know, it was really just a shared feeling about just improvisational dance music, you know? And we just fell into it because we were friends. We had mutual friends with Billy Martin,
Okay.
and we met Medeski, and they took us on the road in '98.
Oh,
We
wow.
had known Warren Haynes since we played with Warren at a showcase, quote unquote, when we were teenagers, and he had kept his eye on us. And so Government Mule took us out early on. We just started opening up. Then Galactic was huge fans of Burnside,
Hmm.
and when they heard about us, and they hired us to come open up for them, and because we were playing for $250 a night back then,
Yeah.
and Cody and I, luckily, we were young enough to do it.
Yeah.
If you're young enough, you can do that real do it yourself
Yeah.
punk rock style of whew, you got to start
Yeah.
young to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to touch on the word because
Yeah,
I regret like I was a big MMW fan and I remember seeing the info about that and I honestly I saw Gospel and I saw North Mississippi All Stars and I was like I don't know I didn't know who you guys were. I was just like
yeah.
I didn't know whatever. And then like a year later in college, my buddy who lived across the hall had your album and he was playing it and I was like, "What is this?" He's like, "Oh, it's the word." I was like, "Oh my God!" I remember hearing about like the Roseland Ballroom shows that were like on fire with Robert Randolph and like
Yeah.
it's that you guys were amazing and that album, that first album, like is just so good. Like and I know that you mentioned even the Sacred Steel album at the beginning at the top of the show. Like, how did you like first were you able to locate Robert Randolph? And how did you recruit him? Because this was before he had his own band too, right? Like,
Yeah.
so how did you get him to be like, come with us, jam scene guys, and like we're gonna put together, a Sacred Steel band?
That was pretty much it.
Yeah.
We had mutual friends. So when Medeski MMW hired us to go on the road, the first Sacred Steel compilation had just come out,
Hmm.
and it was one of those records that changed the course of my life. And we jump on their tour, and they were listening to it as well. And we were playing a lot of those type of jams, and Chris Wood would play with us. So anyway, Medeski and I, as I'm wont to do, I'm like, yo, let's make a record. Let's do something, Like I
Yeah.
just love putting crazy things together. So we had it on the books. We had the session for middle of late 2000.
Yeah.
And then Sacred Steel Volume 2 came out, which Robert had a track on. And Chris Chu, the legendary bass player,
Yeah.
he singled Robert out. He was like, yo, we were on a tour bus, and he was like, yo, you guys have to hear this. And we listened to Without God, Robert's first
Oh,
recorded track, over and over before every show for the rest of the tour. So we're on the road, and we had a New York City date booked at the Bowery Ballroom.
hmm.
So, and then I hear through the grapevine that Robert had recorded with a friend of my dad's, Eric Amble, a great guitar player, music record producer. And so through Eric, we reached out to Robert and invited him to open up our show at the Bowery Ballroom like 2 weeks ahead. So, and Robert's like, okay, cool. So he and the family band, like literally like
Yeah.
his family members from church, they come, and Medeski comes to the show. And we already had a session booked with Medeski, and we invited Robert that night to join us, and he did. And that was it, man. And I'll tell you, we're with Robert right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I saw he was on this tour with you guys.
And he's still the same sweet. I mean, as amazing as his career has been, and operating at the highest level of really anybody I know in some ways, um, and just musically, he operates at
Hmm.
such a high level. Um, he hasn't changed at all. He's just the sweetest, greatest, funniest, likable dude. It's like it's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you. I didn't catch you guys until 2009 when you did a little mini tour right before New Year's, and I saw you guys in Philly. And I remember I was living in DC at the time, and I drove up, and I remember it was like you guys didn't go on till like 10 or 10:30, and then played like 3 hours, and I was like, I got to drive an hour and a half home after this. But this was like it was like one of the best shows I had seen up to that point. It was you guys are so great live. I saw you guys when you did when you guys reformed and were playing a second show, recording your second album. Are there I know you guys play like every once in a while, but are there plans for another album or a tour or anything like that, or is this just going to be like whenever you can get together and do a gig, maybe at Jazz Fest or something that's going to be what's going to be?
Yeah, we hope to definitely play Jazz Fest at least in 2025, and 26. No, I'm sorry, it's going to be 26.
Okay.
We're working on that, and we have a few tracks recorded in the can, but we don't have any plans. Um, whenever the stars align, whenever Robert and Medeski are both willing and able, we'll make it work
Nice.
because it's such a fun band.
Yeah, man. I'm a big Black Crowes fan. We had Steve Gorman on the show early on, so I have to ask a couple questions.
Mhm.
First, you know, what was it like playing at MSG opening for them on that New Year's Eve show? I was there, and I know you guys played like three songs, but was that like your first arena experience opening for them? And how because that must have been a crazy experience.
It was really wild. I was so happy that Mark was back in the band, in
Yeah,
that era. It was really exciting. And we had already played with the Crows a couple of times and made friends, and it was really a fun night. It meant a lot to finally to make it to that venue, of
yeah.
course.
Yeah, and then a couple years later, and I don't know if you've been asked about this show, but the you and Rich put together a one-off show under the name Circle Sound
Right.
at the Bowery Ballroom in early 2007, and I was thankfully there because that ended up being one of the most influential shows that I've been to. You guys played songs I had never heard up to that point. Like everybody knows This Is Nowhere and Mommy What's a Funkadelic, and like how did that gig come together, and were there plans for more?
Well, once again, Rich and I became friends, and I was like, hey, let's do something, you know?
Yeah.
And that's something I learned from my dad, to bring it back full circle to my dad. His partner, Charlie Freeman, the guitar player that he worked with, he said he Charlie never met a musician that he didn't exchange phone numbers with,
Hmm.
And I've always kept that in the back of my mind, and if I make a connection with someone, I always try to, stay in touch, and you never know. And Rich hit me up. He wanted to do some a side project. We did some shows, and it was really fun. And that led to him inviting me to play guitar in the Crows
Yeah.
in later 2007. And Gorman told me that I was the only guitar player that Rich brought in. Like Chris had brought in the other guitar
Mm.
players. And yeah, man, Rich and I, they wrote such great songs. I played with them starting in '07. We recorded Warpaint,
Yeah.
and I started touring in '08. No, I did play a couple of shows in '07, and our last shows were overseas in 2011.
Yeah.
But man, during that time, we recorded, uh, they wrote so many great songs. It was
Yeah.
so exciting. It
Well,
was What a great rock and roll band.
yeah, I remember when they were talking about when after they had fired Mark and Eddie, and I remember like thinking to myself, I'm like, I've got this weird feeling Luther's going to be joining the band because after that Circle Sound show, you and Rich seemed to have so much, like you guys vibed so much and you connected so much, and you were a totally different player than Mark, and but you fit their sound perfectly during that era because they were doing that kind of like almost rootsy Americana sound,
Yeah,
and your playing style really fit that mold at the time. And, like I don't think anyone else could have really fit in to play those songs the way, like you did.
it's a
And
funny thing where you have a classic lineup, like Amorica Southern Harmony,
yeah,
with Mark is such a fantastic thing, and it'll always be in people's hearts, you know. But time goes on and music changes.
absolutely. And, just I'm just curious, like, what was Cody's reaction when you told him you were going on, going to be joining the Crows? Because obviously North Mississippi had to take a pause, for
But
those few
we
years.
really didn't. We their organization was so well planned that we were able to tour. We never
Really?
stopped touring. I
I
mean,
didn't
if you
realize
look
that.
at the dates, I mean, this is before I had kids.
Yeah.
And with the Crows, I was able to bring my wife a lot of the time.
Hmm.
So we had a lot of time together on the road. And then North Mississippi, we never stopped. I mean, there's
Really?
not a year that we didn't tour. We released albums. We released two albums
Well,
and toured in the cracks the whole time.
I was just trying to think because Keys to the Kingdom, the album after your father passed.
Yeah,
I know that.
Hernando was first,
Okay,
Hernando, and then
Hernando.
Keys of the Kingdom. Yeah.
So I forget. It was Hernando while you were with the Crows. I wasn't sure if it was during the time of the Crows or right before.
Maybe it was right before, but
Yeah.
we were touring it.
Yeah. No, because I mean, I can't even imagine that's got to be nonstop because their schedule, like I remember seeing you guys a couple times and they just when they toured, it's like they go and it's kind of like constant. So you must have just had a, packed bill at the time.
Tell you about a thing that's been passed down. Grandma taught baby girl how to shake 'em down. Go shake 'em down, girl. Go shake 'em down. Go shake 'em down, girl. Shake what your mama gave you. Shake what your mama gave you.
I ask this of every guest at the end of the show. You know, what have you been listening to lately? Like three songs, three tracks. Like what's some music that you've been listening to?
Man, in 2020, I busted out a bunch of CDs, and at that time, like the classics, Sly and the Family Stone, Beastie
Yeah.
Boys, Check Your Head were really big. But then I cracked open my Radiohead CDs, and
Nice.
because I just collected, kept up with them.
Yeah.
Over the years. Back in those days, you just buy whoever, when the new records came out, and so I've been listening to Radiohead.
Everyone around here, everyone is so near, so alone, so alone.
And then the Smile.
Yeah.
Has been fantastic. They put out 3 records. It's Johnny
Yeah.
and Tom and their drummer Tom, right?
I don't
He's
remember the guy's name. I know he's not in Radiohead, so
I think it's Tom as well. And they're fantastic, and they really do a lot with odd metric groupings that really fascinate me. And it's very musical, and I really, 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 really like it. Tom York is just like a friend. There's not a lot of music. I don't listen to a lot of music with lyrics these days, but his approach and his vocals, I can just listen to him anytime,
Through the glass, look at you, just eyes and mouth, only saying words, then just turning them around. No matter what the situation, then say.
So that's been my favorite, the Smile, the classic Radiohead stuff, and the Smile.
nice. Well, Luther, I really appreciate you coming on the show. This has been an absolute pleasure. Loving your music since I first, heard the word back in
Thank
2001, and this has been an absolute honor. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and special thanks again to Luther Dickinson for coming on to the show. You can find all of Luther's music, whether with North Mississippi All-Stars, The Word, The Black Crowes, or his solo work, on all major streaming services. You can follow Luther on Instagram at Luther Dickinson, or find out information about him on Facebook or at lutherdickinson.com. You can also find North Mississippi All-Stars and The Word on both Instagram and Facebook, and you can go to NM All-Stars to find out more about North Mississippi All-Stars and when they will be touring next. If you enjoyed what you heard, I would love for you to subscribe to the show and would really appreciate it if you left an honest review on whatever streaming or podcast app you are listening to this show on. Or, just tell a friend or two about the show. Either way, it helps get the word out and helps us grow the show. If you'd like to follow the show on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Threads, and X, all at Dad Rocks Pod. You can also look us up on Facebook at Dad Rocks Podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or any show ideas, or just want to give us a shout, you can email the show at dadrockspod@gmail.com. If you want to check out the music you've heard on this episode in full, we have a playlist which should be linked in the podcast description. Once again, thanks for listening today, and remember, dads, you rock.